Is XCP-ng the home server OS I've been missing my entire life? I've used plenty of operating systems in my home lab, from Proxmox, TrueNAS, Open Media Vault, Unraid, and off-the-shelf stuff from Synology, Asus and TerraMaster. But there's one that I've been avoiding for a while, XCP-ng. Why? Well, I don't really have a good reason for that, to be honest. So this past week, I've been using XCP-ng and I have some thoughts. First off, what is it? What makes it different from all the others? Well, like most of the others, it is a Linux-based platform, but it's powered by the Xen project, so it's part of a larger software suite. The big difference you'll immediately notice here is that the management UI doesn't run on the XCP-ng install itself. With all other server operating systems, you install the OS, navigate to the IP, and boom, you have full control over your server. Not here. When navigating to the IP after installation, you're greeted with a page to install Xen Orchestra. Xen Orchestra is the management UI that runs separately from your actual server. But that doesn't mean you can't run it on there, which is what this process will let you do. Now, I'm sure you're confused and wondering the same thing I was. Why are you like this? Let me explain. So XCP-ng isn't really designed to run on a single server. I mean, doesn't mean you can't, but it's just more catered towards deployments with multiple systems running. You'll see this proved further later on. But knowing that, it makes more sense to separate our management UI from the servers themselves. If we deploy 5 servers, we don't want to worry about having 5 different UIs to deal with. We would much rather just have a single management interface that can interface with all of our servers. And since our UI technically doesn't even have to run on any of these servers themselves, we can pretty much host it wherever we want. For simplicity purposes, I ran the quick setup on one of my servers to get things going. There is a CLI to perform operations on the server itself, but that doesn't give us all the bells and whistles that comes with Orchestra. Then, just like that, we're in and ready to go. My first impressions of the UI itself are okay. It looks like a slightly more modern Open Media Vault and seems to be a bit more intuitive for a beginner than Proxmox. But I wouldn't put it up there with Unraid or TrueNAS just yet. The first thing I did was add my server since it seemed like Orchestra wanted me to do that. But since I'm running 2 XCP-ng servers, I wanted to get my Xen Orchestra instance to see both of those. After successfully connecting, I was set up and all ready to go. Sort of. I noticed that my setup was showing that I had 2 separate pools for both of my servers, or hosts. That's not what I wanted. I wanted a single pool for both of my hosts so that I could easily share resources. My instincts told me that I should go to my hosts and find the option and move it into a different pool. That's not correct. Okay, maybe I have to go to the actual host and do something there. None of this looks right. Maybe under advanced? No, I don't see anything here. Wait, what are all these unlabeled buttons up here? Oh, yeah, that was kind of my experience for the week here. My intuition for setting things up is usually pretty accurate with most operating systems that I've tried. Not really here. Now, this could be because I'm actually dumb, or that I didn't watch any videos on how to use it, or read barely any of the documentation. Or maybe it's just not very intuitive. You decide. Oh, and one thing to note is that there are actually requirements for getting multiple servers set up in the same pool. All right, so now that I have both of my servers in the same pool, I can get the true feel for the Xen setup. This lets me do cool things like share storage and easily migrate VMs. But first, we actually have to set those up. Let's start with the storage. This was kind of interesting. When you go to add a storage repository, you first have to choose if you will be using it for virtual machines or for ISOs. Then based on that selection, you can choose a type. I first wanted to set up my storage for my VMs, but I quickly noticed that there was no option for SMB there. Now this is a Linux system, so naturally it'll want you to run NFS anyway, but as someone who has Linux, Mac, and Windows systems in my home lab, I run pretty much SMB for everything. No worries though, I just spun up an NFS share in TrueNAS and used that. Now we have shared storage on our pool, meaning that it can be accessed from any host inside that pool. I'm starting to see the benefit here on how this whole Xen setup thing works. For ISOs, I just set up a local storage on one of my nodes, and I wouldn't advise to do that since if that server goes down, your ISOs go with it. But I wanted to create a local storage repository to try out, so I did. All right, we have storage for our ISOs. We have storage for our VMs. Let's create one. I actually like the VM creation process here. You can select a template, which just autofills some suggested options based on the OS, which is pretty neat. I spun up an Ubuntu desktop VM because I'm a basic bitch. I'm using my NFS shared storage here as well as a pool-wide network, both of which will allow us to live migrate this VM very easily between hosts. Going into advanced options, we can see things like auto power on, CPU waiter priority, memory ballooning, using a vGPU if you have that set up, and one extremely cool feature, the ability to create multiple VMs at one time. Turning the feature on and selecting how many I want to create will just spin up that many versions of this machine. That's actually awesome. Again, one of those things that show why this is designed for a more enterprise-like setup. In our case, we only needed one, so I continued on with the installation, which went as expected. In a few minutes, I had my VM up and running. I did notice a cool little feature in the console section, which was the ability to live eject your boot media. I don't know of other systems that actually have this feature unless I've missed it, but it's pretty useful for when you first install your system and it requires you to remove your boot media. All right, at this point, we have our storage set up. We have a VM. The next step is to set backups. For some reason in here, backup storage is called remotes, and it's not in the storage interface. It's under settings. And even stranger, the process for creating an NFS mount is different than when creating one via the storage repository. Why? Either way, I just connected the same NFS share and boom, remote. Okay, now we can go make backups. Oh, cool. Not only can you make backups of your VMs, but also of your Orchestra config. Neat. Let's try that. Oh, that's an enterprise feature. Okay, we'll just do our VMs. Wait, really? That's right. The ability to back up your virtual machines is paywalled. Well, if you go to the pricing section for Orchestra, you'll probably notice that even the cheapest tier outside of the free one is way too expensive for most home lab users. However, it's open source software that you can compile yourself and run. They even give you instructions on their website on how to do this. You don't get the support of the paid tier, obviously, but you unlock pretty much all the features, so this is 100% the way you should go if you're running this in your home lab. I get it. Xen doesn't really market towards the home labber, so I'm not going to knock them as a company for their business approach, but clearly it works for them since from what I've heard from people who run Xen, they like it. I went ahead and activated my free trial since I already had this instance up and running, but for a long-term review, I definitely plan on running a compiled version. The first thing I wanted to do was to see what I was missing with the statistics and visualizations, and the visualizations, it's cool. Like, I can see what they're going for here, and I'm sure that with more hosts and VMs, it'll be a bit more useful, but as a home labber with 2 hosts and a single VM, yeah, not much going on here. The statistics are the same story, again, showing that most everything in here is tailored for a much larger operation than your basic home lab. Okay, backups, now that we can actually do that. It's actually a pretty straightforward process. Just select what you want to back up, where you want it to go, and how often you want it to run. The UI makes it super easy, and I had both my Orchestra config and VM backup set up in like 2 minutes. Restoring from a backup is simple as well, since it only requires a few clicks to run back a version of your machine from before a time where your dumbass broke it. I actually really like the interface and backup process here. It reminds me of a more clean version of how Proxmox handles it, except that Xen actually lets you back up your management host. Proxmox, get your shit together. Give us a proper host backup. Now, there are a bunch more features that you get with the paid tier, but a lot of them are way more than what any home labber would need, so you can go check those things out on your own. But the last thing I wanted to check out was the ACLs, and again, clean and simple. You have the ability to set up a user group and assign appropriate roles to that group for all sorts of things like pools, SRs, VMs, and hosts. And since I'm the only one who really does anything in my home lab, for now, I don't really need this feature, but it's good to see that it's an easy setup for those that do. So overall, I actually really like XCP-ng. After getting past the strange UI choices and figuring out where everything is, it's actually not that bad to use. It is missing some major things that home labbers would want, like setting up storage shares and proper container management though. This makes sense for the most part since their target demographic will use this to manage large fleets of servers, not necessarily spin up a Samba share for their anime. Do I plan on using it in my home lab? I mean, yeah, I actually really like it, but I'm still sticking with Proxmox as my main setup. Why? Well, because I like Proxmox and I can pretty much do everything I need in a Proxmox cluster. For a large business, I could see this being awesome though. The ability to easily deploy machines inside a cluster that is centrally managed seems pretty dang useful. If you want to see some actual user experience with XCP-ng and Xen Orchestra, go check out Tom from Lawrence Systems, as I know he actually uses Xen and has plenty of awesome videos on showing off how he uses it. But for me, this is just the beginning of the road. Let me know down in the comments what you think, or maybe what I should try next. Well, that's all I have for you today. If you like this, then drop a like. If you want to see more stuff like this, then subscribe, and I'll make more stuff like this. I want to give a huge shout out to my YouTube members and Patreons. You guys are my enterprise level support system that is kind of behind a paywall, but that's okay. You guys are the best. And if you're still watching, you're cool too. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next one.